and welcome to Palace Intrigue. I am your host, Mark Francis. The Netflix documentary Harry and Meghan begins with a disclaimer. This is a first-hand account of Harry and Meghan's story told with never-before-seen personal archive. All interviews were completed by August 2022. Immediate speculation is that the date is specifically mentioned to make it clear that the Sussexes weren't doing all this around the time of Queen Elizabeth's passing. Within the opening minutes, Harry says, "This isn't just about our story, so much bigger than just us. No one knows the full truth. We know the full truth. The institution knows the full truth. And the media knows the full truth because they've been in on it. I think anyone else in my situation would have done the same thing." We're pulling this quick turnaround recap from several sources. The Guardian writes, "In the opening scenes of the series, Harry is shown at Heathrow Airport in footage he filmed himself in March 2020 as he prepared to leave the UK for the last time as a senior royal. Explaining why the couple made the documentary, he said, 'This is about duty and service, and I feel as though being part of this family is my duty to uncover this exploitation and bribery that happens within our media.' Meanwhile, Meghan is seen separately, filming herself in Vancouver wearing a towel on her head and saying, 'Unfortunately, in our standing for something, they are destroying us.' Images of newspaper headlines flashed up on the screen included, 'Harry's girl is almost straight out of Compton.' Meghan said, 'Firstly, I'm not from Compton. I've never lived in Compton, so it's factually incorrect. But why do you have to make a dig at Compton?' Other headlines shown in the documentary are, 'One's gone gangster,' and another saying Meghan's ancestors were a tailor, a teacher, and a cleaner in a racially divided Jim Crow South. Harry said, 8 days after the relationship became public, I put out a statement calling out the racist undertones of articles and headlines that were written by the British press, as well as outright racism from those articles across social media. It was horrible,' Meghan said, 'but I continued to hold the line, say nothing.' The Washington Post recap focuses on the first episode and the love story of Harry and Meghan. In their 2017 interview with the BBC, Harry said they met on a blind date, but in the new series, it appears that a degree of social media research was involved before they actually met face-to-face. A mutual friend sent Meghan an email. An email pops up on the screen saying that she knew Meghan was single and her friend, Prince Has, had asked about her and wanted to meet her. Once Meghan determined who Prince Has was, she asked her friend if she could see his Instagram feed. Meghan said, "I asked if I could see his feed. People say, 'Did you Google him?' No, but that's your homework. Let me see what they are about in their feed. That to me was the best barometer. I went through and it was just beautiful photography and all these environmental shots and this time he was spending in Africa." Harry described how they met through social media, revealing that he was scrolling through his feed when he saw a Snapchat picture of Meghan with a filter showing dog ears in his snout. Harry said, "Meghan and I met over Instagram. I was scrolling through my feed and someone who was a friend had this video of the two of them. Oh gosh, isn't that the whole thing? It's got like doggy ears." The laughing Meghan said before Harry added, "That was the first thing. I was like, who is that?" His wife continued, "That's ridiculous." They got each other's numbers and went on their first date in the summer of 2016 when Meghan was in London for Wimbledon. A picture of Meghan appears on the screen. Harry says, "For so many people in the family, especially the men, there can be a temptation or an urge to marry someone who would fit the mold, as opposed to somebody who you are perhaps destined to be with." Harry makes many comparisons between Meghan and Diana. "So much of what Meghan is now and how she is so similar to my mum. She has the same compassion, she has the same empathy, she has the same confidence, she has this warmth about her." The Washington Post describes the second episode as moving into darker territory, focusing on what the couple see as harassment by the media. It opens with footage of Harry and Meghan being driven to an event in New York City in 2021 that appears to show them being stalked by paparazzi. Harry appears nervous and keeps swiveling his head, looking behind for chase vehicles. Diana died in a car crash in a Paris tunnel while being pursued by the Paps, as Meghan called them. Harry describes how dating became a combination of car chases, anti-surveillance driving and disguises, which isn't a particularly healthy way to start a relationship. Meghan recalls the time when Will and Kate came over and I met her for the first time for dinner. I remember I was in ripped jeans, I was barefoot, like I was a hugger. I've always been a hugger. I didn't realize that is really jarring for a lot of Brits. Meghan discusses the media. "Truth be told, no matter how hard I tried, no matter how good I was, no matter what I did, they were still going to find a way to destroy me." Palace Intrigue will be right back. Meghan described her first meeting with the Queen. She likened the formality of the royal court as something from medieval times, where bowing and curtsying were a big deal. Harry said she had no idea what it all consisted of, so it was a bit of a shock to the system for her. Grinning, Meghan added, "I mean, it's surreal. It wasn't like some big moment of now you're going to meet my grandmother. I didn't know I was going to meet her until moments before. We were in the car and we were going to the Royal Lodge for lunch, and Harry was like, 'Oh, my grandmother is here. She's going to be there after church.' I remember we're in the car driving and he's like, you know how to curtsy, right? And I thought it was just a joke." Harry added, "How do you explain that to people? How do you explain that you bow to your grandmother and that you would need to curtsy, especially to an American? That's weird." Meghan's reaction, "Now I'm starting to realize this is a big deal. I mean, Americans will understand this. We have medieval times dinner and tournament. It was like that. Like I curtsied as though I was like, 'Pleasure to meet you, your majesty.'" Harry described the first time Meghan met the family. "I remember my family first meeting her and being incredibly impressed. Some of them didn't quite know what to do with themselves. They were surprised that the ginger could land such a beautiful woman and such an intelligent woman. But the fact I was dating an American actress was probably what clouded their judgment more than anything else in the beginning. 'Oh, she's an American actress. This won't last.'" Meghan added, "The actress thing was the biggest problem, funnily enough. There is a big idea of what looks like from the UK standpoint, Hollywood, and it's just very easy for them to typecast that." Harry discussed the palace's no-comment approach to how Meghan was treated by the media. "What people need to understand is that as far as a lot of the family were concerned, everything she was being put through, they had been put through as well. It was almost like a rite of passage. Some of the members of the family were like, 'But my wife had to go through that, so why should your girlfriend be treated any differently? Why should she be protected?' And I said the difference here is the race element." Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, spoke publicly in episode 2. She discussed Meghan being mixed race and revealed how, in hindsight, she would like to have had a real conversation about how the world sees you. Doria remembers being impressed by Harry. "He was 6'1", handsome man with red hair. He had great manners. He was really nice. They looked really happy together. He was the one." Before the end of episode 2, Meghan reveals that friends started to question her relationship with Harry after she received a death threat. The Daily Beast focused on the parts of the documentary that dive into the history of the royal family's links to the British Empire and slavery. David Olusoga, the author of Black and British, asks, "Who dreamed that Britain would have a black princess? Who could have conceived that? It was a conclusion to a history that was so improbable as to be astonishing." Author Afua Hirsch adds, "The first ever commercial slave voyage conducted by Britain was personally financed by Queen Elizabeth I, and it continued to be financed by kings and queens right up until its abolition." Harry addresses the notorious 2005 incident in which he decided to dress as a Nazi at a party, a decision which he says was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I felt so ashamed afterwards. All I wanted to do was make it right. I sat down and spoke to the chief rabbi in London, which had a profound impact on me. I went to Berlin and spoke to a Holocaust survivor. I could have got on and ignored it and made the same mistakes over and over in my life, but I learned from that. In the third episode, Meghan says she didn't know what a royal walkabout was, where royals meet members of the public who have gathered on the streets before going on her first one. "I never saw pictures or videos of a walkabout. Like, what's a walkabout?" Harry explained. "I could talk it through as much as I knew from my own experience of what I'd seen. The piece I really didn't know about was the style, right? And what a woman needed to, how they needed to dress and all that. Everybody was just so excited and pleased and happy, and I think people looked at it and went, 'Wow, what a breath of fresh air.'" Meghan shared the tale of her first Christmas with the royals. Recalling her first Christmas at Sandringham, Meghan said, "I remember so vividly the first Christmas at Sandringham, calling my mum, and she's like, 'How's it going?' And I said, 'Oh my gosh, it's amazing. It's just like a big family, like I always wanted.' There was just this constant movement, energy and fun," she added. "And at dinner, I sat next to H's grandfather, and I just thought it was so wonderful. And I was like, we chatted about this, and Harry, and was like, all you had is bad ear, so we couldn't hear anything you were saying. And I was like, oh, well, I thought it went really well." One more takeaway from the 3 episodes is this comment from Harry, which is being seen as a swipe at both his father, a king, and his brother, the future king. "I think for so many people in the family, especially, obviously, the men, there can be temptation or an urge to marry someone who would fit the mold as opposed to somebody who you perhaps are destined to be with. The difference between making decisions with your head or your heart, and my mum certainly made most of her decisions, if not all of them, from her heart, and I am my mother's son." Lots more on this podcast tomorrow. There you have it. If you'd like to email us, our address is thepalaceintrigue@gmail.com. Please follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite shows. Really helps us out. My thanks to John McDermott. I'm Mark Francis. This is Palace Intrigue, and good times.